All right, and Entertainment Thursday gets to continue. Thank you for staying with us. This is where you get to have yourself an amazing Thursday morning. This is the only way to start off your morning. Now, right now, this next interview, we will be talking about film, filmmaking, and just us telling our own stories as Africans. And an African filmmaker. Her name is Nyasha, and she's here to just talk to us about her journey in the filmmaking industry and what they are showing right now and where exactly you can go and watch some of these films and the documentaries that they get to make. So allow me to introduce her. Welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing very well, thanks.
You're doing well.
Yeah.
All right, talk to me about Nyasha. Tell me more about Nyasha and why specifically that African filmmaker.
So originally I am from Zimbabwe and I am a proud Zimbabwean, but I've lived in other African countries, South Africa for a long time, and now in Kenya has been my home. And I don't know, I think African for me is really important because the labels that we give each other with countries and the borders that were created by a handful of white men who were colonizing the continent at the time. And I think sometimes these barriers are used to divide us. And I think as Africans, we need to be more united and work together. And so I prefer to consider myself as a Pan-African, a person who anywhere in Africa is home.
Where did your love for film first come in? Or rather, tell me your earliest memories of film.
I remember, and I think a lot of people used to have this, where every weekend we would go to this place where you could rent out cassettes to watch the VHS tapes, and I would always watch the same ones with my mom. So my mom would get one and then I would get one, and it was that weekend ritual, that special thing. But my favorite memories were actually of a drive-through that we used to have in my hometown in Bulawayo. And we used to go there. My mom would make us macaroni and cheese and would eat in like recycled ice cream tubs. And we would watch movies, and I remember watching Home Alone there and Mrs. Doubtfire, and those are some of my favorite memories, like on a big screen, but also with the comfort of like your mom and home-cooked food.
Those are your earliest memories when it comes to matters film. So when did you first decide that I actually want to become a filmmaker? What was that, point for you?
Well, it took a while because my first degree when I went to university was in finance. And I studied finance, I started working as a consultant. But at the university, I had been part of the student newspaper, so I knew there was this thing in me that really loved storytelling and wanted to connect with people. And then one day my boss told me that I read too much news and that it could make me great in conversation, but it wouldn't make me good at the job I had been hired to do. And I was like, I think I need a new job.
Wow.
And so I decided to apply for my master's in journalism and documentary making. And then I think from the moment I picked up a camera, I knew that it would be film versus like print or radio or something else.
How long ago was that?
That was the change was in 2014. Yeah.
So since then, now you got into this space fully. How has it been like, and how is it, just being that African filmmaker, getting to tell our own stories? Has that been easy for you? Has it been challenging? Just let us in on all of that.
Definitely ups and downs. When I started my career, I was actually living in New York. And under the advisement of a few people, they were like, if you really want to do something and sort of make it, you need to go back home. Home being Africa, and I decided to come to Kenya because I had an opportunity to also work in Sudan, and so that's how I moved to Nairobi. And then since then, it's been a lot of happy circumstances. Obviously, hustling as a freelancer, which I'm still today, can be very tough. We live in a two worlds feast or famine. So, and it's unpredictable when the feast is and when the famine is going to be. So even if you try and plan, things can change. But I've managed to travel to so many African countries, almost now 25. I hope to go to all 54 by the time I live my full life. And everywhere I've gone, I feel like people always think I'm a local or treat me like a local. And it's just heartwarming to see how people are so much more receptive to seeing someone who looks like them trying to do the work and tell their stories. People are so ready to open up and so happy to share. And I work in documentary, which requires a lot of people to be vulnerable about their own stories and share their secrets, things that they might not even have told anybody else. But every day I'm pleasantly surprised as to how people are willing to do that with me.
Yeah, I love the fact that you said, you know, you've gone across all these African countries, 20,
25, I think,
yeah,
at this
25
point, yeah.
of them, and every time you're there, you don't feel like, you feel like you're part of those communities. You feel like you're one of them in every country that you've been in. And I mean, if you don't mention that you're not from Kenya, I could bet no one would have pointed out that she's not Kenyan. You just look Kenyan, and that's the beauty of Africa and Africans. Like, we are just one. We are one and the same thing. You cannot tell that this one is from West Africa, this one is from, unless they mention, or maybe if they have the accent, then maybe you can tell. But that's the beauty of us. And I love the fact that you are going around all these countries and telling the stories from those particular countries. So, is there a specific intention of you deciding, I will go to all these countries, and every country I go to, I'm doing something from there?
Well, it's a bit of a mix of opportunity. People hire me as a freelancer to go and film in different areas, and then sometimes you see a story and you say, okay, I want to go and discover more and look into that, or I feel like I'm not hearing anything from there. Who can I work with who's from this area or this country to tell a story? So it's usually different. In some cases, I've just decided I want to go and see this country for myself. So I also am a big fan of, when you do have your spare coins, to go on holiday around Africa instead of saving it to go overseas. Go visit the country next door. So there are times, last year I had an assignment, a job in Ghana, and then I decided to extend my flight and then take a bus to Togo, which is 3 hours away, and go and see for 2 days what it's like. And people are always like, oh, you're from here. Okay, that's really far away. Okay, cool, welcome. You know, so it's always nice.
Yeah. And right now, the talk of town, the talk of the continent, and the talk of the larger social media platforms has been Aisha Speed, who was in the country, I think, a day ago or 2 days ago, and right now he's on a tour. He's touring Africa, and the conversation that has been coming out of that is that we don't seem to have told enough of our stories, of who we are, because now most people from outside the continent are experiencing Africa from his lens, you know, are getting to know, oh wow, Africa is not what we have been told it is, you know. Africa is not just poverty. Africa is not just some, you know, poor continent and without culture and all of that. So they are getting to experience it now. So maybe what is amiss, or aren't we doing enough to tell our own stories?
I think people are working, but there's a lot of undoing that we have to do, because I think even our education structures, the way we've learned, even as Africans, we don't know enough about each other, let alone someone like Aisha Speed, who's coming from the States. So, you know, in the States, they don't learn much about Africa. They're quite ignorant to what happens on the continent. And even, you know, people will say Africa's a country when it's not. But I found that sometimes we also have those misconceptions about those places where people will know 1 or 2 headlines about your country, and then they will stick with those headlines. So, and you're more than that. And sometimes, you know, it's a nice stereotype or a thing, but sometimes you're like, there's more to a place. People will say to me, oh, you live in Kenya, you know, everyone's really tall because the Maasai, you know? And I'm like, there's a lot more to Kenya than the Maasai, right? Or wildlife. I come from Zimbabwe. We went through a really bad economic period where the inflation was crazy. So people will often meet me and say, oh, but aren't you $1 trillion person, or aren't you a billionaire? And I'm like, haha, but no, you know? And I think even as Africans, we definitely need to do a lot more work to see behind the own stereotypes that we put against each other. And a lot of that has to do with travel and exposing ourselves to different cultures, whether it's through movies, through music, through podcasts, entertainment, because that's where you can really sort of like travel in your mind through books. That's where you can discover different places and also see how what someone is experiencing in Senegal or in Zambia could be very similar to the experience that you're experiencing right now.
Well, let's talk about what you are actually promoting right now, and that is Matabeleland. Tell me about it. What is it all about? It's a documentary. Let us in on it.
So Matabeleland is a very personal film. It's a film that is from my home country, Zimbabwe, and the region that I grew up in, the south part. So you can say the province area is called Matabeleland. And it's a personal story about a man called Chris who's really struggling with his connections in life. He's struggling to commit to his girlfriend who loves him but really wants him to commit. And he's also struggling with his relationships with his many kids, and he's having troubles at work. And all of this is happening while he's working very hard as an immigrant in Botswana, the neighboring country to Zimbabwe. And he feels all of this is happening because his father's not buried in the right place. And, you know, as Africans, the importance of how we bury and where we bury people is very important. So his father was never buried in the right place because his father was killed in the 80s in a genocide called Gukurahundi. Over a 5-year period, 20,000 people were killed. But now when we have a change in government in 2017, 2018, then Chris decides, this is my opportunity. Now I can actually do something. So he goes to look for his father's remains more than 30 years later, finds his father to rebury him, hoping that that will give him the ability to get some closure and to move on in his life, to, you know, commit to the woman that really, really loves him, to connect with his kids, to feel like he's done something as, you know, the father. But more personally, people tend to think that it's going to be this political documentary and your typical, this is what happened in 1983, and it's really not that kind of a film. It's a very personal story about a man in his 60s with his girlfriend who really loves him. They have a lot of banter between the two of them. He doesn't want her to take her home just yet. As you know, I think a lot of people watching this know, like, for a man to take you home to his family is a very big deal. So this is like this looming conversation in the film, which eventually finally happens. The film is also about, you know, a very hard-working man who struggles to be vulnerable. And I think when people have come to watch this film, they often say that this character reminds me of my uncle, this character reminds me of my dad, or the film has so many simple scenes of just people cooking ugali at home and having dinner, you know, and the conversations that happen around. It's a very everyday kind of film that just happens to have this sort of political context in the backdrop, but it's more of a very personal film about him and his relationship with his girlfriend.
What would you want people to get out of that documentary? You know, for those who will come to watch it, what would you want someone to take home?
I think, you know, it's funny, when we made the film, we had very specific intentions. For me, I really wanted the people who called Matabeleland home to feel seen and acknowledged, to feel recognized. But I've heard people, even Kenyans who've gone to see the film this month or last year when we premiered at NBO Fest, say this film is like a mirror to like an African existence, to a very specific type of person, a hardworking person, a faithful person, a person who's really trying the best to do something for their families but is struggling. For some people, I think they've seen themselves in the relationships, the dynamics. I've heard even very young people be like, ooh, this relationship's a bit triggering for me, because of a relationship where there was unrequited love. I think for a lot of people, it's been an eye-opener to a region that they don't know anything about or they haven't heard much about, but it's a very personal take on this place.
Yeah, and you mentioned you premiered at the NBO Film Festival, which is an amazing, amazing festival, right? So what's the importance of us having more of such spaces where we can have different filmmakers from around the globe to just come in one, you know, in one place and get to showcase what they've done?
It's extremely important to have festivals like NBO Film Fest, opportunities for people to gather and to watch films. What's really great about a festival like NBO Film Fest is that it centers on films about Black people, about Africans. That's like the core at its identity. And so they focus on looking at films, whether it's from Latin America or overseas, but that center around people who look like you and I. And I think that opportunity is rare, because often when I meet people, they'll say, oh, I went on to Netflix, but you know, I saw like maybe a couple of South African films and a couple of Nigerian films, but I haven't seen anything from here. A film festival is the kind of place where you get to go see a film that's made in a place you've never heard of. And I also think communal watching, which we've lost a little bit with video on demand, something about sitting in the cinema, which kind of reminds me of my experiences of going to the drive-thru, is so communal in how you experience a film. There are things you will laugh at more when you're in community with other people than if you're by yourself at home. And if there's a scene that's really sad and you start to cry, everybody feels the heaviness of that scene. There's something so beautiful about cinema, and I think festivals like NBO Fest have really done a good job of trying to reach out to people, and also even in the locations that they've chosen to show the film. There was a screening in Kaloleni, screenings in Kaloleni Social Hall, really bringing the film out to the community, and I think it's only growing. So I think those festivals are really, really important, especially for us Africans.
For sure. So for those who would want to come out and get to watch Matabeleland, where is it showing and when?
So right now you can watch Matabeleland at Unseen, Nairobi, which is an independent cinema in Kilimani on Wood Avenue. And next month we're going to be showing at Prestige, which is on Gong Road, for 2 weeks. So over the next 4 weeks, I would say you'd be able to watch Matabeleland in the cinemas, either at Unseen or at Prestige. So I think even just listening to the artists before, how important it is for us as Africans to consume our work. We've had a really great reception in Kenya towards the film, and I really hope that more people come out and find themselves in the film.
All right, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on the show, and thank you for the work that you're doing as an African filmmaker, just telling our stories across, you know, the continent and across the world as well. We appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
All right, this is where we end this conversation, but Good Morning Kenya Entertainment Thursday still gets to continue. More music coming up, as well as an interview. We'll be looking at the Matatu culture, plus so much more. Don't go too far.